Hello to you all. You're welcome to this session with the ladder back down, titled Public Speaking with Confidence. And I really hope that we're going to all contribute and participate in this workshop today so that we learn from each other. The ladder back down is an entity that's been established at the beginning of this year to try to develop workshops for Black and ethnic minority communities, both in the UK and globally. We have got a lot of potential, and in some cases, we're not yet actually fulfilling our potential due to various factors. But I do honestly believe that if we can help ourselves rather than expect to be helped, rather than demand to be helped, as a Black race in particular, then we'll get a lot further. We'll make a lot more progress in terms of our development and the fulfillment and achievement of our potential. So this public speaking with confidence workshop has been developed because I've been asked to deliver a course from participants at a previous workshop. So I really hope that we can all contribute today and learn from each other. What are we going to cover during this session? We're going to talk about public speaking and a phobia that many of us may hold to getting up and standing up to speak in public. We're also going to take a look at things that I actually do before I speak at a conference. Once I've been invited to speak at a conference, what preparation do I put into my plans to ensure that I go and enjoy the speaking experience rather than endure the experience? We'll also be taking a look at my tips for how we can ensure that our nerves don't get the better of us during the conference when we're actually speaking. Finally, we'll be covering what we may want to do at the end of the conference. Once we've actually reviewed our videos, we've assessed ourselves, once we've obtained feedback from the conference facilitators, how we can use that feedback and that self-assessment to learn lessons and to start planning for our next engagement. So I really hope that we all learn from each other during today's session and that we leave this place actually feeling empowered to go out there and speak in public in whatever setting we may find ourselves invited to speak. Could be within our place of worship, could be in the workplace, could be at a social engagement, for example, where you've been asked to come and talk about a celebrant, to pay tribute to a celebrant. All of these settings offer us ample opportunity to go out there and speak because we each have something within us that we can share with the public. So I actually drew up this slide and this saying in 2017. And it says, when you learn to laugh at yourself, you lose the fear of being laughed at and the inborn nature to laugh at others. So what do I mean by this? The fact is that many people who are scared of speaking in public, of standing up and speaking in public, are scared that they will be laughed at. They're scared of what people might think or say about their speech. Whereas what I'm trying to convey here is that when you actually learn to laugh at yourself as a human being, you actually lose the fear of being laughed at. I've been laughed at for many years over specific features of my body, for example, or for some things that I've done in the past, or simply because of the way that I present myself or used to present myself. But when I started learning to laugh at myself, and I do that a lot, the fear of being laughed at suddenly deserted me. Along with that fear of being laughed at deserting me, I also lost any ability to laugh at or mock others. So when you learn to laugh at your own limitations, you lose the fear of someone else laughing at you. And you also lose the inborn nature, because everyone's born with the nature to laugh at other people. But when you learn to laugh at yourself and you focus on yourself and your own weaknesses, you lose that fear of being laughed at by another person, and you also lose that nature to laugh at others because you're more focused on your own weaknesses. And at that point, you then actually start to relish the opportunity to speak in public, because you're not scared of anyone laughing at you when you speak publicly. And speaking publicly then becomes a pleasure rather than a fear. Now, I remember my first school play, secondary school play, and this was in Nigeria, where I attended secondary school and my last year of primary school. Now, I remember my secondary school play. I still remember that night vividly, and I'd practiced and rehearsed with the team, and I got on the stage that night. As soon as I got on the stage, I saw the people, and it was a very dark hall. I still remember vividly, it was a dark hall. And as soon as I saw the faces of the audience, I simply ran behind the curtains and sprinted all the way back to the dormitories. And I went to bed and I put my cover over my head that night. And that was many years ago. But I was scared. For some reason, I developed that fear. Even though I'd rehearsed my speech, I'd done everything that I could to make sure that I delivered my part of the play successfully. But I just dashed off the stage and I then ran to my room out of fear. But when you laugh at yourself, you lose the fear of any audience laughing at you. So please retain that. Retain that phrase. When you learn to laugh at yourself, you lose the fear of being laughed at. So, why are most people scared of speaking in public? Why are most people scared of speaking in public? Would a delegate like to answer that question? Because this this particular workshop has been placed, we've written this into our program of learning because it was requested. So I'd like to ask that question. Why are most people scared of speaking in public?
It could be that they are shy, or they have the fear of being embarrassed, or not saying the right thing.
Yeah, self-consciousness.
Self-consciousness, shyness, being scared of being laughed at. Anything
I think
else?
it could also be the lack of expertise in the subject area you've been invited to talk about.
Thank you. Lack of expertise.
Low self-esteem.
Low self-esteem. Thank you.
Lack of confidence.
Lack of confidence.
Okay,
Okay.
Chibom said failure, and she said in the chat box accent.
Accent, yes. Thank you so much. I was actually expecting to hear that. Accent, what else?
Past experience.
Yeah, previous experience. Thank you. What did she say there, please?
They're being in the center of attention.
Yeah, they're scared of being the center of attention for that moment that they're actually speaking. They're scared of actually being the sole focus.
People actually said failure.
Failure, fear of failure. Thank you so much for that. So I've noted all of those, and thankfully, a lot of those different issues are actually covered in this workshop, although we will be talking about self-esteem and confidence at the workshop on the 5th of December. And it's very important. This is the first workshop on the 5th about confidence for 2021. This is the first workshop that I will actually be urging every delegate to attend, please, because it's vital that we don't fear failure, that we actually develop the confidence to move forward and to move past previous failure. So please enroll for that workshop in particular, confidence to progress in 2021. So thank you for all of your contributions. Now let's take a look at what we need to do when we're planning to speak at a conference or at an event or at an engagement. The first thing we need to do is to plan for a successful conference, for a successful speaking engagement. Now, I've spoken about my initial failure to speak in public, which was at a school play, but I haven't spoken about the fact that from 2004, I believe, when I was invited to address consultants and senior IT leaders at an engagement by the British Computer Society, I've continued to be invited to speak at engagements, and there was a time between 2013 and 2018 where I was trying to work my way through a career curveball. And during that time, I continued to be invited to speak, including at the World Trade Center in Vancouver and at the Hague in Amsterdam. So how did I progress from this young lady running off the stage during a school play to speaking both locally in the UK and globally in various settings? The first thing that I learned to do was to plan my speeches. And in my school days, unfortunately, there was nothing like Google, there was nothing like all this social media. There was nothing to share with me how to actually plan for a successful speaking engagement or for a successful play. So in my adulthood, I've learned that if I want to speak successfully, whether it's in a school play where I've learnt my lines or on the global stage, I need to plan for a successful outcome. So what questions am I recommending that we ask ourselves when we've been invited to speak in a social setting or in a professional setting? The questions we need to ask ourselves: number one, what qualifies me to speak? Why have I been asked to speak on this subject? Again, the reason why I'm saying that this relates to social settings is that if you've been invited to speak at a birthday party, for example, or a party, you've been asked to speak about the celebrant. You need to ask yourself, what qualifies me to speak about this person? Do I know this person? Or what am I speaking on? The same applies to a to a professional setting. We need to ask ourselves, what qualifies me to speak? And it's not so that we can get out of that speaking engagement. Rather, it's so that we can actually reassure ourselves that we are qualified to speak. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been asked to speak. Out of all the people in the world that could have been asked or invited to come and speak at The Hague, to come and address your professional peers, why have they invited you? If you were not qualified, they would not invite you to speak. So we need to reassure ourselves in asking ourselves that question, that indeed you are qualified to speak. I am qualified to speak, which is why I've been asked to come and speak, which is why I've been asked to come and address my peer executives, which is why I've been asked to come and speak to the board, which is why I've been asked to come and speak to my senior managers. If you're not qualified, you would not be asked. In a social setting, if you're not qualified to speak about a celebrant, you wouldn't be asked to speak about that person, would you? So please rest assured that if you have been invited to speak somewhere, it's because the organizers of the event believe that you are qualified to speak. So number one, believe in yourself. Then you need to ask yourself the question, what am I speaking on? Because that will help you to prepare for your speaking engagement. What have I been asked to speak on? What is the subject that I've been asked to speak on? And who is the target audience? Is it your peers? Is it senior executives? Who exactly is the target audience? Because the content of your speech will be largely dependent on the target audience. And one essential question before you start preparing your speech or your slides or whatever documents you're going to speak on, you need to ask yourself the question, how much time have I been given? And you need to ask the organizers of the conference, how much time do I have to actually deliver my speech? Because there's no point you having prepared a 3-hour speech only to find out that you've only got 5 minutes to talk. So these are questions that we need to ask ourselves. The first question is to provide ourselves, you the speaker, with reassurance that if you weren't qualified, you would not have been asked to speak at that engagement. Regardless of your accent, regardless of your qualifications, your academic qualifications, if you've been invited to speak, that means that the organizers have identified something within you that the world needs to hear, that an audience is waiting to hear. So let's remember to ask ourselves these 4 questions. Number one, to provide ourselves with reassurance that, you know what, I am qualified. If I weren't qualified, I wouldn't have been asked. When we're planning our speech, what do we need to do? Well, it might be helpful if we go and watch experienced speakers out there. Go and view webcasts. We can view TED Talks or videos of experienced speakers just to see what they do, how they manage their speaking engagements, to see the reaction of the audience, whether the audience likes what they see, whether they're being responsive to what they're hearing. Just see how experienced speakers come across. If you've been invited to speak on a topic that is unfamiliar to you, or even if you're familiar with the topic, ensure that you conduct research and more research and yet more research. Whenever I'm invited to speak, regardless of my previous presentations, even if I'm invited to speak on the same subject, I'm often invited to speak on the relationship between a chief information security officer or a chief information officer or an IT director and the board. But I never ever use the same presentation. Why is it not a good idea to use the same presentation? Can anyone respond to that? Would anyone like to respond to that?
Maybe your audience are different.
Yes, yes, your audience may be different, but they may be the same audience. You may have the same audience, or at least some people who attended your previous presentation attending your second presentation, in which case they won't attend only to hear the same thing. You don't want them to attend your second presentation only to hear you repeat the same story that you had told at your previous speaking engagement. So I always conduct research not only into unfamiliar topics, but also into familiar topics so that I can vary my presentation. I remember a few years ago at an information security conference, I was invited to a panel to discuss cyber warfare. So that is cyber warfare conducted by various states, different countries against each other. And I was unfamiliar with the topic of cyber warfare. I knew of it, but I didn't know, and I knew of the different states, the power of the different nations with regards to cyber warfare, but I spent a lot of time familiarizing myself with facts and data and figures. This X country, for example, has 500,000 employees, 500,000 employees hired by the nation to simply conduct continuous, ongoing cyber warfare. So I did my research. This country has 250,000 state actors hired by their government to conduct cyber warfare. So whenever I'm invited to discuss or to present on an unfamiliar topic, I'll conduct my research. And if I'm invited to speak on the same subject again, I'll make absolutely sure that I go and find different facts and figures to present to the audience. When we're planning our speech, when we're conducting our research, we'll definitely need to view previous speakers' take on certain subjects. So we are not allowed to plagiarize content. So let's say, for example, I want to say that President Obama once said this. It's okay for me to cite that President Obama once said this on this topic, but it's not okay for me to simply copy what he said and pass it across as if I had stated that. So plagiarism is not okay when we're preparing our speech, but citations are okay, where we cite the original author of our content. So when we're planning our speech, it's okay for us to cite previous speakers, but it's not okay for us to plagiarize and to simply try to pass that content across as our own content. When we're planning our speech, it's not, it's not advisable, well, I'd say, to write jokes into our speeches. If you're a comedian, of course, go ahead and write as many jokes as possible into your speech. But if you're writing a speech and you want to come across as funny, you simply don't write jokes into your speech, because it's better to be spontaneous. I tend to try and, set the scene for my speeches by saying something funny. And I always do this because even up until this week, someone repeated the same thing, that if you take a first view of me before I open my mouth, you'd think that I'm really stern, that I'm really strict, that I don't have a life, basically, that I'm not someone that you'd want to actually approach. And I blame my deceased dad for that, actually, because I've got his face. And there's nothing that I can do about that. I can't walk around with a permanent grin on my face. But I've had to actually try and, change my character, because I didn't used to smile a lot. I used to be this very nervous and shy individual, actually. So I've learned to try and come across within the first few minutes of me starting a speech as a personable speaker, so that people go beyond the face, so that people stop focusing on my strict face and they actually start endearing to the person delivering the speech. But please don't write jokes into your speech, because they'll come across as scripted. Rather, if you want to tell a joke, tell a spontaneous joke whilst you're addressing the delegates, but don't write that joke into your speech. When you're planning your speech, rehearse in front of a mirror. Pretend that you've got the delegates that you'll be addressing in front of you, and practice. Practice until you feel comfortable. Practice until you feel confident. If you don't want to rehearse in front of a mirror, rehearse in front of a trusted critic. Children are usually good at saying, that doesn't make sense. What you're saying doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense to children, then you need to actually just determine whether you need to simplify the language in your speech. To simplify the language in your speech, unless of course you're delivering something on brain surgery to a group of scientists, then children won't understand that, but you could still rehearse in the front of a professional peer, just to give you the confidence that when you actually get up on that stage, you will be conveying knowledge, that you will be transferring knowledge, because that is the essence of speaking, whether it's in a social setting or within a professional setting. If you've been asked to come and speak about a celebrant at an engagement, what you're really trying to do is to convey knowledge about that celebrant to the audience. If you've been invited to speak at The Hague, you're being invited to convey professional knowledge to the delegates, to the audience. So based on that, we rehearse, we practice to make sure that we will be able to convey or impart some knowledge to the audience or the delegates, wherever we're attending or wherever we're speaking at. We can start our speech with an interesting comment or question. I started this session by asking us the question, how many of us have spoken or been invited to speak? That's a question. How many of us speak publicly? I started by sharing my story of how many years ago I ran off stage during a speaking engagement at a school play. So we start our speech with an interesting comment or question, just to engage the audience, to start off that connection with the audience. Because if we don't do that, in this day of technology, you may find that half of your audience are there fiddling with their phones. Some may be actually working because they're required to work. And so they're not actually learning anything from your speech because you haven't connected with them from the onset. So a good idea might be to start your speech with an interesting comment or question. And then when we're planning, we plan to make each speech a memorable one where the delegates will each remember at least one comment or one fact from your speech. I still have delegates that attended a speech that I've made previously from 10 years ago, where they've sent a message saying, you said this. And I'm thinking, did I say that? But that's because they've remembered what I've said. So plan to make each speech a memorable one, whereby each delegate takes one thing away from your speech. And that includes if your speech is simply a 5-minute speech. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long or short you have, make your speech a memorable speech where everyone gets to take something away and they deem, yes, that was worth my 5 minutes of attendance. So we plan for a successful outcome. We don't simply receive the invitation and say, yep, I've spoken on that previously, so I'll be fine, dust off our old slides, and then go along and expect our speech to be successful. We plan for a successful outcome. So, how do we prepare our speech? We research, as I've just said there, we research. We make sure that we conduct research. We find out all the information that we can find out, all the necessary information that we can find out about our speech by going online, viewing television reports, also reading books in some cases. Reading books, reading magazines. And then when we're actually writing down our speech, we make sure that we highlight key bullet points. I don't actually write down speeches. I prefer to just have bullet points, or including if I'm preparing a slide presentation. I make sure that I just have nuggets. When you're preparing a slide deck for a speech, you can't afford to simply provide information where you write paragraphs and paragraphs of speeches, and then you read off those slides. That's what a lot of professionals refer to as death by PowerPoint. So with the speech, we simply write bullet points to prompt us and remind us of what we would like to share with the delegates. Our speech also has to be well paced. So if you've got 5 minutes, if you've been given 5 minutes, so please always ask, how long have I got? I've said that already, but please remember to ask, how long have I got? Because that will help you to determine the pace of your presentation. So a well-paced speech, I always say, but this is just me personally, 3 minutes per slide. And that doesn't apply to workshops, but rather to speeches, 3 minutes per slide. So if I'm told that I'm going to have a 30-minute speaking engagement, then I will prepare 10 slides maximum with bullet points on these slides. So we make sure that we have a well-paced, we prepare a well-paced speech, a well-paced presentation deck of slides for the engagement. And we organize the speech, and I'll talk about that. We'll organize the speech into 3 sections, which I'll talk about in a moment. And we ensure that our speech is readily understood. And the reason why I suggested earlier that we try and rehearse our speech in front of a child is because our audience may have varying levels of knowledge. They may have varying levels of understanding of the language which we've been invited to speak in as well. So we need to make sure that we prepare a readily understood speech where we're not using technical jargon, where we're not trying to impress with our English, for example. Now, for those of us who may come from different backgrounds where English is spoken with different accents, some of us may know that, well, let me use myself as an example. With my parents and my mum now, who my mum's still alive till today. So with my mum, when I'm speaking English, I don't use the same intonation. I don't use the same accent as when I'm speaking professionally or or as I'm speaking to you now. I either speak Yoruba, which is my native tongue, or when I'm speaking in English, I definitely don't speak with the same accent that I'm speaking to you now. So if I were invited to speak at an event where the delegates have all come from my homeland, let's say, they're all based there and I would switch my accent to make sure that everybody understands what I'm trying to say. So we make sure that our speech is readily understood, because there's nothing worse than standing up in front of an audience. So you know your audience, you've been told your audience is secondary school children, all based in a country abroad. We then need to make sure that everybody on that session understands what we're trying to convey in our speech. And if it means that we switch our intonation, we switch our accent, we just need to do whatever it takes to ensure that everybody gets something, everybody learns something from our speech. Any questions there, please? Any questions?
There have been quite a few questions, especially about facing people. I have one question on the chat that says, how do I overcome palpitations and dread?
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And please, may I park that question, because I have got that written into the slides. So that's a very good question, which I'll answer later on in the slides, if we don't mind. Could I park that question? Are there any other questions on things that I've covered? But I will respond to that question because I have written it into the slides.
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Not on the chat. I don't know if anyone wants to.
Actually, not a question, but a comment, please, about the accent. I've been to some places when, people try to switch their accent, obviously to fit in just to help with the audience. And sometimes it sounded so like unreal, unnatural. So I think sometimes you need to sort of like tone it in a way that, we're also like representing ourselves, even though we're trying to like match the audience.
I think you've raised a very, very valid point there. And I wouldn't suggest that anyone goes and tries to change their accent to, for example, let's say that I work within an environment which is, heavily geared towards a certain language. Now, I wouldn't go and change my intonation to delegates from that country, because I can't naturally speak with that accent. But I know that I can readily speak in Yoruba, or with a Yoruba accent, because that's where I originate from. So I wouldn't say that we try to unnaturally change our accent, if that's a word. But what I'm saying here is that because I speak in a different accent to when I'm addressing my mom, if I were then invited to speak or address people from my country, I can already speak in that intonation. So there's no point in me trying to speak in this English, this real strong English accent, when I know that every single delegate or audience on at the workshop is from where my mom is from. If let's say that I'm addressing 60 or 70-year-olds from my mum's from my mum's town, I would not be speaking in this accent because they wouldn't necessarily understand me. So I totally agree with you that if you cannot speak in a certain country's accent, then you cannot go and start trying to learn and trying to change things towards a speech with everyone. But if you can, so I'm simply saying that if we can, and if I'm addressing, 50 delegates based in my mum's hometown, elderly people from my mum's hometown, where I need to just come down to their level so that I make sure that they enjoy the experience of listening to me, and that they also learn what I'm trying to convey. So I do take your point that you cannot simply go and start changing your accent to the different delegates, but it means that all I'm saying here is that if our audience consists solely of people from our background, where then we simply don't we simply try and reach out to them so that they actually get something from our session. I can imagine myself speaking at my mom's church when they used to have a church, when my dad and mom used to have a church. My dad used to pastor a church, for example, and if he invited me to speak to the old women's group, the elderly women's group, I would speak in English, but I wouldn't speak in this intonation because they wouldn't understand me. So thank you so much for your contribution there. Did I see someone else that wanted to raise a comment or a suggestion or a question?
I'm not sure if I put my hands up. I was trying to do that. Sorry, my name is Ola. Well done. I mean, fantastic.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so BC Olowu made a very valid point because people might get it wrong. There's accent. There is also trying to put on and trying to not sound real. And some people are so used to saying certain things or speaking certain ways, and they will think that that accent is so English and posh, and it's not really. It might not necessarily apply to other people like that. Do you understand? So
Yeah.
we might be sending wrong message by saying people. I was born in London. I went to finishing school. I was so rascally. I thought they were trying to change me to the other way. So I didn't want to do, oh no, and he's right and posh and that. I was not ready to do that. I just want to be natural, and I like to be natural. So there's absolutely nothing wrong in being natural, which is what BC was pointing. Our point is so valid. People are so used to saying, oh, and it is this way and that way, so we cannot do it that way. So by doing that, it's sending a signal, especially if you're addressing people, because speaking to people naturally is actually more attractive by trying to be what you're not, that sort of thing, so that's a valid point. But yes, I do understand that you need to speak properly so people understand what you're saying. And then, your pronunciation is also very important, rather than trying to do the accent that is not you. Am I right by saying that?
Yes, you are absolutely right again. And as I just said there, so when I'm speaking to my mom, I speak in a different intonation, which is me. And so, and that's just the way that I've grown up. And when I'm speaking to, in a professional setting, or indeed to my husband and I, we laugh a lot over the different ways that we pronounce things. So, but when I'm talking to elderly people and to my mom in English, I don't speak this way, and it is natural. So I don't go out of my way to switch my accent. It's just the way that it has been, for all my life, and I don't know why that is, but yeah, when I'm speaking to my mom or to her elderly age or people in an age range, yes, then my accent just naturally switches. So I totally agree with you that we can't forcibly change our accents, but I'm just saying that we need to be mindful of our audience, and if there is a chance that they won't understand what we're saying, and we can already speak at their level of understanding, then I see no harm in speaking to them just as I would speak to my mum. So that's all that I was saying. If I can speak in a different accent, then I will speak in that accent to people. I could not see myself, when my dad had his church, going to address the elderly woman, you know, age of 70 above, and speaking the way that I speak now. I would speak the way that I speak English to my mum, simply because that is their level of understanding. So I totally agree with you that we shouldn't try to change ourselves. Nobody should try to change your accent, as long as you're able to convey information across the people, as long as you're able to convey information across your audience, because that is the essence of speaking publicly, being able to convey information and knowledge. And as long as you're able to convey that knowledge, speaking the way that you speak, that's absolutely fine. If you're unable to convey that knowledge, speaking the way that you speak, and you are able to speak with a different accent, then I'd say speak with that different accent. If you're unable to, then you simply need to stick to what you are able to do. So nobody's suggesting, and I'm absolutely not suggesting, that we should go and change our accent or go and start speaking unnaturally. We cannot afford to do that. And with my mom, I don't speak, I don't think that I speak unnaturally to her. I speak English to her, I speak Yoruba to her. But when I'm speaking English to her, I speak with a different intonation, absolutely, compared to the way that I speak, or when I'm speaking publicly, or speaking at work, or speaking to delegates in a workshop. Any further questions, please? Because we've got 5 minutes before we take a 10-minute break, please. Any further questions?
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Go on, please.
Go on, no worry. Go on.
Okay. No, please, Emmanuel. They said that you should go on. So here's my spouse. So I'm a bit biased in terms of letting him speak.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I believe the most important thing is because I grew up in Nigeria for 30 years, so there's no way I can change my accent or to speak or to. You understand what I'm trying to say? The most important thing is to speak clearly and well for people to understand what you are saying. That's the most important thing. And I understand what my wife is saying, or my wife was saying earlier. You know, is about how to communicate with people, the audience, the people that you are talking to, not necessarily about the intonation or about the phonetics. You know, when we want to force ourselves to speak phonetics, or that is when the speech become anytime, because recently I've been facing camera and stuff like that, and anytime I wanted to switch, I made mistakes. I just made mistakes. If I'm not flowing with my level or my natural ability, if I want to say, I want to speak like my wife is speaking, I'm not going to make mistake. Or maybe I want to speak like this, the way these people speak. But if I just flow by myself naturally, I always get it right very well. So just speak clearly, slowly and clearly. That's my take.
Thank you for that.
It's better to get it right, sir. Don't bother to change your accent, sir.
Yeah. So my husband, as he said there, he's not prepared to change his accent, and we've never even tried. I mean, we laugh at ourselves the way we speak, but with my parents, as I said, you know, I mean, my accent naturally switches. It naturally switches to a different intonation, and so that's all that I was suggesting there. That if we do switch naturally, then please, I mean, just recognize that some people may not understand us if we keep the, phonetics going, people like me. So, and in which case, if we can switch, then we do switch. We've got a hand raised there, and we've also got I think we've got some more
Yeah.
questions. So please, yeah.
Contributions. I don't know if you want to cover those now before we go, or
Okay, maybe we should stop for now, and then we then we start again after in 10 minutes time, if that's okay.
works for me. Let's ask everybody. Are we all good to take 10 minutes break, please?
Yeah, let's take
Yes.
10 minutes
Yes,
break,
please.
and
Thank
then
you.
we resume in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Giving you a nice ice breaking then, so let's go.
Thank you. So again, we make sure that we prepare a well-rehearsed speech, a well-written speech, a well-paced speech, a well-organized speech, and a readily understood speech. So thanks to everyone that has contributed to raising questions or comments or suggestions about the previous slides. When we're preparing our content, we need to make sure that we remain tactful and sensitive to the audience that we're speaking with, including when we're raising jokes, for example. When we're talking about, when we're raising jokes during our speech, we need to make sure that we recognize the audience that we're addressing. We recognize any cultural issues. Could we please mute everyone so that, besides me, of course, so that we don't get their noise within the video? Thanks so much for that. So we need to make sure that we're aware of any cultural areas that we avoid. We avoid upsetting our audience. We also make sure that we remain constructive. We remain upbeat and enthusiastic in our speech. We provide constructive advice, constructive critique as well. So I appreciate the fact that when everyone has contributed in our session before the tea break, everyone raised constructive alternatives. I don't think people should switch their accents because of this. So there was nothing like, I don't believe people should switch their accents, full stop. We had a constructive discussion around why it might be a good idea for people to switch their accents and why it may not be a good idea for people to switch their accents. So in our speech, we make sure that we're being constructive and that we're proposing solutions, not simply raising questions. We propose solutions, we raise suggestions, and we remain constructive. And we also need to make sure that the content is impactful, that it has an impact on the audience, on the delegates, that it has an impact, that it makes a difference, that it causes them to consider a change. I received feedback during the week, on Thursday, I think it was, on the emotional intelligence workshop that I delivered a few weeks ago. I received feedback on Thursday, and the feedback struck me for many reasons. And I'll be seeking the permission of the lady that wrote to me. She didn't actually attend the workshop, but she viewed the video afterwards. But her feedback struck me for many reasons, but I'll seek her permission to share her feedback before I share that and publish that, maybe against the video, or I'll ask her to publish it on the YouTube site. But our content needs to be impactful. It needs to make a difference. It needs to have an impact on the lives of the delegates. Needs to increase their knowledge. So the content needs to be impactful and it needs to be imparting. We need to exchange or to provide knowledge or information. as I've repeatedly said, we cannot afford to give a speech where we do not impart any knowledge. If we're not imparting knowledge, we then should not be on that stage. If we're not imparting knowledge, we shouldn't really be on that stage sharing information. I prefer to view every speaking engagement as a knowledge sharing engagement. And please note the word sharing there, because even as I'm preparing my content and delivering that content, I'm also learning. I'm learning not only when I'm delivering the content, I'm also learning from the feedback from the audience, including viewing their non-verbal feedback. So the content of our speech needs to impart knowledge, not only to the delegates and the audience, but also to us. When we're sizing our content, so we've asked how much time we've got, then we need to actually size the content of our notes or our slides, and we make sure that we don't overload the presentation with too much information, so that we end up running out of time to deliver our speech. And we also make sure that we don't load our content with too little information, so that we've been given half an hour to talk and we finish within 15 minutes. So again, I tend to use the rule of thumb of around 3 minutes per slide. Not for workshops, rather for speeches where I'm going to actually get up there and speak on my own. Or if I've been asked to speak as part of a panel, then I'll size my content according to the instructions of the organizers. So we run the risk of preparing too much information or too little content. And I know some people will say that they prefer to cram or to memorize their slides. But the one issue that I have with cramming is simply that you can cram all that information and then you get asked a question during your slide presentation that totally throws you off course. You may get asked a question that totally throws you off course and takes your content in a different direction. So I also asked the organizers, is this presentation simply going to be a walkthrough where I deliver my speech and then questions are asked at the end, or can delegates actually just put their hands up and ask questions? And I have had in Vancouver, I remember when I went there to deliver my presentation, I was told that no, that you'd just deliver your speech and then, and then questions would be reserved for the end. But as soon as I started speaking, delegates started raising their hands up. And the facilitator said, okay, could you answer that question? And if I'd crammed the speech, that would have totally thrown me off course. So I don't recommend cramming, although some may find it beneficial to cram, to absolutely cram every word during their practice, but I don't find that helpful for my content and when I'm planning for my delivery. When we're planning, again, we need to make sure that we plan for unexpected interruptions. We plan for unexpected interruptions in case someone asks a question and the facilitator says, yes, go ahead and ask your question. We also need to plan for previous speakers' delays. And this is my pet hate when it comes to speaking. And I'll talk about that later when I say no nos for us as speakers. But you need to plan for the fact that some speakers may actually go over their time, leaving you with less time than you thought you may have to deliver your speech. Which is why we use bullet points rather than write a whole speech of text. We try and prepare bullet points to prompt us on what we're going to say. But when you're sizing your content, you make sure that you've got core nuggets at the top of each slide, so that if you're required to rush your presentation because a previous speaker has taken longer than their time slot, you can at least convey your core messages. So that's when we're sizing our content, trying to prepare our material. Now, we tend to recommend having a structure when we're preparing our presentation. And we start with saying, here's what I'm going to tell you. So we introduce our content to the audience. From the onset, we introduce our content. Here's what I'm going to tell you, our introduction. Then we now tell them what we've said we would tell them, which is the middle of our presentation. At the end of our presentation, we then summarize what we've told them in a conclusion. That way they remember what we've imparted. Now, I like what a delegate said earlier. I'm not sure if it was Amma or someone else who mentioned this, that I tend to emphasize, place a lot of emphasis on keywords whenever I'm presenting. And that's a deliberate tact to try and ensure that we remember what I'm trying to convey to us. So if it's something that I'd like you to remember, especially if it's something that I think may boost your confidence, then I'll place that emphasis on what I'm saying. But we start by telling our delegates what we're going to share with them during our speech. Then we tell them exactly what we've said we would tell them. That's the middle. And then we summarize what we've presented to them in our conclusion. Now, when we're preparing our visual aids, we need to remember that our visual aids, our slides, are not the attraction. You are the attraction. When you were invited to the event to speak, you weren't invited based on slides that you hadn't yet prepared. You were invited because the organizers deemed that you have got knowledge that you're seeking to impart. So when preparing your slides, it's great to have attractive slides, but remember that it's you and what you say that is going to remind the delegates of what you say. It's not your slides. Nobody ever leaves a presentation or a workshop or an event or a conference saying, wow, those were beautiful slides. They have come there to listen to what you've come to say, and they want to leave there with memories of what you said, not with memories of your slides or your props. So let's just remember that. Do you need to use slides? Do you need to use props? For example, you may want to wave a book around and say, within this book, I read XYZ holds this opinion about this subject. You may want to use props in that way. You may want to use slides, or in some presentations, actually, TED Talks, for example, you don't use slides. You simply get up there and you speak. So remember again, you're the attraction, not your slides, not your props, but you. People want to hear your story. They want to hear what you've got to say. Again, in some presentations or some organizations where they've asked you to come in and speak, they will say, okay, can you send your slides via an email, first of all, before you attend, so that we can help you to load your slides. We need to just make sure that we are aware that we remain aware that technology may sometimes fail. So you may want to take your slides on a USB stick as well, just in case the technology fails on the day. And also, you may want to take notes, bullet point notes. You may also want to include notes using the notes function on your PowerPoint presentation. But remember, you are the attraction, not any props, not any notes, not any slides, not any technology. They're simply there. The audience, the delegates are simply there to listen to you. And every single person on this workshop has got something inside of them that the world needs to hear. I'm really encouraged by the number of delegates that have spoken up this morning, including offering contrary views, constructive but contrary views to my opinion. And that shows that each and every one of us and each and every one of you has something inside of you that is worth sharing. I love the fact that Chi has returned. Chi is young, and he attended the previous workshop, and he said something which I remember till today, and I've been sharing with quite a few people since he said that on the emotional intelligence course. He said that he would not exchange his integrity, that he will not compromise his integrity today for his future. So again, everybody has something. Each and every one of you has something inside of you that the world needs to hear. So do not fear speaking in public. Plan your speech. Plan to have a successful speech. And then go ahead and deliver that speech. Now, here's a checklist that I tend to follow. I always ask if I can meet or hold a telephone call with co-presenters in advance. Especially if I'm speaking on a panel, then it's always a good idea to discuss with fellow presenters in advance. And one of the reasons of that is to make sure that you're not going to deliver the exact same presentation as your co-presenters on the panel. It's different if you're speaking as a solo speaker. But if on a panel, then I'll raise that request. Always plan to arrive at the venue early, or if it's a Skype presentation, then again, we plan to log on early enough to deal with any technical issues. If it's a venue that we're going to attend to speak at, then we plan to arrive early so that we don't get caught up in train delays and running sweating at the last minute at the venue. So we plan to arrive early enough to resolve any issues. We may arrive at the venue and there are technical issues. Then we know that we're going to need to just open our speech, open our notes, and just quickly remind ourselves of what we've got to say, and then get up there and speak without the slides, for example. A good idea as well is to mingle with delegates pre-conference. So if you arrive early enough, then you'll have the opportunity to mingle with delegates. In most speaking engagements that I've attended, they've invited me to a speaker's room, a co-presenter's room in advance of the session starting. But I always try and mingle with delegates as well, which is why I arrive a lot earlier than most. And that's not just because of the breakfast, rather because I like to have that opportunity to mingle with delegates before my session starts. And I'll tell us why later. Also, practice deep breathing. If you feel nervous about speaking in public, practice your deep breathing when you are preparing. And please remember this, that absolutely everybody in the room has chosen to come and listen to you because they believe in you, because they believe in your knowledge. So you practice that deep breathing. You practice your deep breathing. You make sure that you're not breathing rapidly or holding your breath. You practice deep breathing and you remember at all times that every delegate listening to you is a mere human being, just like you. An equal human being to you, but a human being who was chosen to come and listen to you because they believe that you can impart some knowledge to them. So just remember to keep breathing. And remember hydration. So if you find that you've got a 30-minute speech, you may want to take a bottle of water, because we'll talk about that, hydration and water and things like that later. But remember to go up onto the stage with water in you. Take a sip of water before you begin your session. And as I said, prepare a bullet point list of your content just in case technology fails. Just in case the slides go off. So a bullet point list of your content so that you can deliver without slides or without any props if necessary. So that's all we need to do to plan towards the conference, towards our speech. And during the conference, we then need to give it all we have. Now, common issues here: anxiety, the jitters. And how do we show that we're anxious? How do we let the audience know that we're anxious? In some cases, our hands may shake. In some cases, we may start to pace, walk up and down across the stage when we're speaking. If we're sitting in a chair in a panel, we may start to rock backwards and forwards, moving backwards and forwards because we're simply nervous. In some cases, we end up standing rooted to the spot out of fear, where we don't move. We just stand in the same place and read off the slides and then run off the stage. Another issue that shows that we're nervous is when we talk over the heads of our delegates or the audience rather than facing the audience. So these are issues that even experienced speakers face. And whilst I say that I retain a healthy dose of nervousness, so I don't get overly anxious when I'm speaking. I don't, I just don't, get, scared of fellow human beings. But sometimes I do find myself pacing, walking, from one end of the stage to the other. And I just remind myself, I just have to remind myself that, hang on a minute, you are speaking to fellow humans who have chosen to come and listen to you. And once you remind yourself of that, you'll stop pacing, you'll stop rocking or staying rooted to one spot. So we need to constantly remind ourselves during the delivery of our speech that you are speaking to fellow human beings. I am speaking to fellow human beings who have chosen to come and listen to my speech. Retain that thought throughout your speaking session. Number one, you're speaking to fellow human beings. And the second thought, the delegates have chosen to come and listen to me. They have actually chosen. These adults have chosen to come and listen to me. So I do not need to fear anyone, any delegate. Worst case scenario, you may have one or two delegates walk out. And in some cases, they may have been called out via a phone call. They may have needed to leave the room to go and attend to work or to a family emergency. So don't fear any member of the audience. Don't fear any delegate who has chosen to come and listen to you speak. Don't fear another human being and their reaction to your speech. Once you learn to laugh at yourself, if you learn to not take yourself too seriously, you won't fear any delegate's reaction to your speech. You'd use your delegate's reaction to improve yourself, which we'll talk about later, but do not fear. Don't fear to the extent that you start trembling on stage, or you start pacing or rocking, or you stand rooted to the spot, or you flee the stage. So these are common issues, and these are ways that we can actually identify whether we're overly anxious about being on the stage. When we're nervous, our speech tone may be too low, or we may start speaking in a shrill voice where our speech is too high pitched and we start sounding unnatural. We may start speaking too fast, especially where we're trying to read off a script, or if the previous delegate, or if the previous speaker rather, has overrun on their time. We then start trying to speak too fast to get all of our information across. Or that may be due to nerves. Again, we may be speaking too slowly because we're nervous and we don't want to misstate something. So these are areas that we need to manage to make sure that these are issues, or these behaviors don't take away from that amazing speech that you've prepared, that amazing piece of information or knowledge that you're trying to impart to your delegates. Don't let fear take away from the knowledge that you have. The knowledge that you have, of which has caused the organizers to invite you to speak and to share with the delegates. Don't let fear scare you off and stop you from imparting knowledge. How can we actually manage our anxiety? Well, we'll talk about dressing, what we're wearing, eye contact, body language, vocals, and we'll talk about water, tea, and coffee. And I've put a question mark there because I'll be asking us the question, should we be taking water, tea, coffee when we're fearful, when we're anxious? And we've talked about taking deep breaths, making sure that we take deep breaths. Now, with our dressing, first impressions do count. The way we dress matters a lot when we're speaking. And unfortunately, my opinion is that females are judged more harshly than males when it comes to dressing when we're speaking. Men just have to wear a suit, or if it's not a formal speaking engagement, then they just wear what they want to wear. But with women, you can wear a suit, you can wear a dress, you can wear trousers, you can wear. So first impressions do count, and we need to gauge the sort of event that we're speaking at, first of all, to determine how we're going to dress. But I'd say that one thing that I don't have, one item of clothing that I don't have in my wardrobe is a suit. I've never really liked suits. I don't have a suit. But I make sure that I dress appropriately. I dress formally for formal speaking engagements. And that would mean a dress and a jacket. So dressing appropriately is so important when we're speaking at an engagement. If we're speaking in an informal environment, wearing a suit will put the delegates off from you from the start, because their focus will be on, why is this person wearing a suit? And whilst you're trying to impart informal information to them, all their focus will be on is your clothes. So we dress appropriately for the setting, for the speaking event. We dress appropriately for the audience, for the target audience. And we also need to make sure that we're comfortable with what we're wearing. As you note there, I said I don't own a suit because I'm not comfortable in suits. I said earlier that because I have a very formal face, I dress down. The same applies to in workplaces that I've worked in. And in my current workplace, I don't wear a suit. I don't dress according to my title. I dress comfortably, and I also dress confidently. Now, one of the things that I found about myself, and I don't know whether it's the same with anyone else on this forum, but I like colors. You know, I dress, so I like colors. I like different colors, but I can only wear 2 colors at a time. So I don't wear, go around in multicolored, I mean, like Joseph's multicolored coat or anything like that. I dress comfortably. And I know that if I wear brown, for example, brown, my mood tends to not be as buoyant as when I'm wearing pink or purple, for example. So I tend to wear bright colors more often than not. If I'm speaking at an engagement, I'm more likely to wear black and white. So that means that I'm dressing comfortably and I am more confident because I'm wearing colors that I'm comfortable with. If you don't like wearing all black and you go to a speaking engagement wearing a black suit simply because you deem that that's the best thing to wear, that could impact upon your confidence even as you're speaking, because you're wearing something that you're not comfortable in. So dress confidently. And confidence comes from within. And we'll talk about this on at the workshop on the 5th. But dress confidently. And avoid dangling jewelry if you're at a workshop, because that will distract again from your message, because everyone's watching your jewelry. Everyone's observing your earrings. And I know that I've got long earrings on today because I like long earrings. I like prominent earrings, but I would not wear these earrings to a speech. And please remember to do up all your shoelaces, your belt, your zipper and everything, because you don't want to trip up. You don't want, again, to have distractions where the audience is looking at your untied laces or your undone up belt or zipper or anything like that. So make sure that you check all of those things before you actually go on stage. Now, when we're trying to make eye contact, it's important that we make eye contact throughout our speech, which is why it's never a good idea to just fill your PowerPoint presentation with lots of text. bullet points where you glance at your bullet points on the slides and then you turn to the audience. We don't tend to focus on a single individual. So we don't try to outstare a single individual that is looking at us amongst the delegates. We don't just focus on that one person, because remember that if you're speaking to a room of 1,000 delegates, 5,000 delegates, 510 delegates, whilst all of their focus is on you, your focus has to be shared and distributed across the 10 delegates or the 500 delegates or the 5,000. So we don't try to outstare one person that is focused on you, because their focus should be on you as the speaker. But you speak to everyone. You cast your glance across the room at different delegates. And remember, so I've said don't glare at delegates. Sometimes when we're trying to stress a point, when we're speaking, our faces, well, my face, I know, can appear quite stern. So we need to remember to smile. When we're speaking, even if we're speaking at a serious topic, we can't afford to glare, because again, everyone's focus is on, why is this person glaring at us? So interject smiles into your speech. Unless, of course, we're talking, I mean, if you're in a meeting, for example, or you're talking about the pandemic, you're at a conference, you're at a health conference talking about the pandemic. Yes, then don't smile, but don't glare at the delegates. And remember, I said earlier that we need to try and engage in chats with some delegates before the conference starts. If we arrive at the venue early, just try and meet a few delegates and engage in a chat with them. When you're now on stage, if you're feeling fearful, seek out the faces of a few of the delegates that you'd engaged with before the session. Hopefully, they'll be smiling at you because you've taken that time to engage with them before the session started. So if you're nervous, just seek out their faces within the audience whilst you're making eye contact to try and calm your nerves. Seek out a few friendly faces. You may have some of your colleagues at the workshop. Again, seek out their faces. And hopefully, if you've been a good person to them, then they will be smiling and encouraging you. So we make eye contact. We don't spend most of our time looking at the slides, not facing the audience, not facing the delegates. So eye contact is so important, and I believe we had a few mentions of this earlier. Now, body language. Be yourself. Don't try to be anyone that you've actually viewed on a video or in a TED Talk or in a webcast. Be yourself. And this was mentioned earlier when we were discussing the accent. You can't try and put on a fake accent that you don't speak in normally. So be yourself. Be your absolute self. I know there's this saying that is going on in organizations and on the internet, bring your whole self to work. Well, I'd say even more so, Be yourself when you're speaking. Use your hands to good effect, but don't wave your hands and keep flapping your hands around on the session. Don't keep on just flapping, but occasionally use your hands for emphasis. Use your hands for emphasis. And if you're on a panel, then you need to stand, or sorry, if you're on a panel and you're sitting down to speak, because you do occasionally get events where you're actually sitting down and discussing within a panel, then you need to sit up, sit tall. No matter what the title or qualifications or experience of your fellow panel members are, sit up and sit tall. Because again, if you didn't have it within yourself, if you didn't have that knowledge within you, you wouldn't have been invited to speak amongst your peers. So you sit up and you sit tall. Even if you're a student and you've been asked to come and give your views to a group of governors, or you've been asked to come and make a presentation to the senior leadership team of your school, sit tall. If you're standing up, stand tall. Because if the organizers didn't believe in you, they wouldn't have invited you to grace that event. So you stand tall, you sit tall. Don't slouch in your seat, and do not view yourself as inferior by any means to any other speaker. Another speaker may be knowledgeable, more knowledgeable than you in a certain area of your discipline. But that does not demean or reduce your knowledge or your expertise in your area. So you stand tall when you're speaking, or you sit tall if you're sitting and speaking. Now, when we're speaking, we may occasionally trip up. We may make a mistake. We may say something that we need to correct ourselves on. Now, if you trip up in real life, what do? How many of us have tripped up in real life before? I suspect that would be all of us, if not most of us. So all of us, if not, then definitely most of us will have tripped up. What did we do when we fell? We simply got up and we then continued along our way. So the same applies if we trip up in our speech. We simply need to keep going. You trip up, you get up, and you keep going. Keep going. Deliver your speech. Complete it. Learn from that fall. But don't stop and freeze. And don't think about that mistake until you've finished your speech. If it's something that you need to correct, if you've stated something and then you think, no, that's not correct, then you can correct it straight away. For example, if I were to say, well, in this country, they employ 500,000 cybersecurity analysts to engage in cyber warfare. And then I find that, and then I remember, no, that's the wrong country. Then I could correct that there and then. I should actually correct it there and then. But then I can't afford to dwell on that mistake whilst I continue with my speech. I need to keep going. Once I've corrected myself, then I keep going. So remember that you may make mistakes in your speech, but you need to keep going. Keep going until you've ended the speech. And then when we talk about what we need to do post-conference, we'll mention this again. But if you trip up, you keep going, because the knowledge that you had in you when you were invited to speak at that conference hasn't suddenly departed simply because you fell down, because you tripped up, because you made a mistake in your speech. The rest of the knowledge hasn't departed. So if you trip up, if you make a mistake, keep going. When we're talking, we need to make sure that we maintain consistent language. We maintain the same level of information. We don't suddenly start speaking technical language to the same audience and then suddenly take things down and start speaking in a language, in basic language, and that we expect them to understand. So if you're speaking again to a group of engineers, you speak technical language at their level throughout. But we can't afford to simply start teaching them the basics of cybersecurity, for example, when they're all experienced cybersecurity experts. Our language needs to be consistent according to the level of expertise in the room amongst our audience. We need to also learn to pause periodically. So we can stop speaking periodically and look around. Be comfortable with silence. Be comfortable with silence, because you can use that brief seconds of silence to regain your composure if you're anxious, to look across the room for familiar faces to smile at, and then we continue. So it's okay to pause periodically and to be comfortable with your silence. Another reason we may want to pause periodically is so that the audience has time, a few seconds, to digest what you've said. But if you keep talking and continue to talk and talk and talk, then you may find that the audience switches off permanently. Another thing that we need to learn to do, which I struggle with, and I know this from viewing videos of workshops that we've recently delivered, is to avoid filler words. One of my filler words is so. I've noticed that in a lot of videos that I've presented in, I use the word so. So this, so that, so this, so that, and so. So we need to try and avoid these filler words that, again, take away rather than add value to our presentation. We often say things like, this, or this, or that. So these are words that we can practice until we reduce using such words within our presentations and within our speech. And of course, we said that we need to pace our speech so that we're not too fast, we're not too slow when we're speaking. Now, any questions, please, before I take this slide? Questions, comments, please, as well. Comments, questions?
No questions in the chat, but there are
I've seen a raised hand here.
Okay, good.
Yeah, please go ahead and speak.
Lola, please go on.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that one thing I do is when instead of taking a pause, I ask a question from the audience as well. That way I can catch my thoughts together.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good contribution as well. Very good suggestion. Yes, you may be able to ask a question from the audience if you're on a panel or if you're indeed in a speaking session where you've said to the facilitators or the organizers that you will be taking questions during a session. I think one of the reasons why I would only do that if I've asked questions is one of the reasons why I would do that only in certain events is because you may get asked a question where you then have to answer that question and then you run out of time from delivering the rest of your presentation. So it is a good suggestion, and indeed when I ask at the beginning before I start planning for my presentation, when I ask the organizers if the delegates will be allowed to ask questions during my presentation or not, yeah, then I could do that. But if they say no, that I would just deliver my speech, then I'd just do that just to make sure that delegates don't interrupt the flow or take away from the time that I need to conclude the presentation. But that's a very good suggestion. I can see that there's other
raising her hand.
Please go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to go back to, when you mentioned dressing, when I go out, I literally dress differently. Is it I'm wearing an Afro head wrap? It doesn't matter what the event is. I usually do that because I dress for my comfort. So are you saying that the dressing aspect is like if it's a corporate client and you're comfortable, is a problem to dress how you're comfortable?
No, I said exactly the opposite. I said dress the way you're comfortable. Remember I said that I don't own a suit.
Yeah.
So even if other panel members are wearing a suit or other speakers are wearing a suit, I do not own a suit and I'm not going to go out and buy a suit. So you're quite right. If you're more comfortable wearing your African head wrap, then you wear your African head wrap. If I wanted to wear native to speak at an event, I would just wear colors that suit my comfort. And so if it's a black tie event, for example, I mean, I've been invited to black tie events previously, and I would just wear a black and white native because I don't have a suit. So I definitely agree with you there. Again, it has to be about your comfort whilst respecting the audience. Whilst respecting the audience.
But I thought I heard you say that if you wear something dressed, they will not be happy or something. I'm sure I picked that up at some point.
No,
okay.
no, I did not say that anybody would not be happy. What I did say though is that we don't want to allow our dressing to be a form of distraction.
Okay.
So we need to make sure that our dressing is not a distraction, that it doesn't take away from the important message or the important knowledge that you're seeking to impart. So I said, for example, that I love long earrings, but for a speech, if I'm invited to speak, I would not wear those long earrings simply because I believe that they may be a distraction to the delegates.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Does that clarify your question?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. I think I had another hand up there. I saw.
No.
Any further questions?
I do.
Okay.
Filler words.
Yes.
I'm always saying, I know there are techniques, this the Speakers Alliance or something, they have techniques to, you know, overcome saying, what do we do? Because I say it a lot.
Well, I think that for that, I would need to go and check out the Speakers Alliance, as you just said there, because I haven't mastered that as well myself. So I'd simply say that we need to be aware of them and to make use of anything online. You've just mentioned the Speakers Alliance, but there are different areas, different techniques that we can use. But I haven't mastered a technique yet. As I said, I've continued to view the videos that I've delivered through the ladder back down, and I've noticed that, okay, that although I've managed to reduce the erms and ers, I've replaced those with so this, so that. So it's a lifetime learning process. We need to learn continually. We need to remind ourselves continually as we're speaking that, okay, I've recognized that I'm saying this. I've recognized that I'm saying so too frequently in my conversations. How do I fix that? How do I stop saying that? And how do I make sure that I don't replace it with another filler word?
Okay, thank you.
Hi, so can I say something about the filler
Yes,
words really
please.
quickly?
Thank you.
I was
Thank
expecting
you.
you to jump in.
Yes, please.
So thank you for everything you've presented so far. They've been very, very, very relevant.
You're welcome.
You never know everything, and there's always something to pick up from someone
You're
somewhere.
welcome.
I believe in terms of filler words, you can't really get away from them completely because filler words are words in themselves. They're just words that are used very often. So you can't, it's like saying, I want to stop using so in a sentence. It's not possible because you need to say so at some point in time. So as I'm saying this, I want to carry on. So I've said so, right? I think it's just about using them words as little as possible. And so what that means is being more concise, being better structured with your words, being better prepared with your words. And preparation is not just about writing stuff down or having it on slide. It's also about being mentally prepared. As we're speaking right now, I can speak to you without having to use any filler words because I know what I'm about to say to you from the very next word to the next. But if I'm delivering a presentation, it entails or involves more structure, better preparation, and better understanding of your audience, as we talked about previously, and modes of delivery. Props are also very, very good in that respect. So you can't really get away from filler words, to be honest. You just need to be very focused on what you're delivering, be structured, be concise and straight to the point. And if that means delivering a presentation that's slightly less in terms of timeline than what you planned for. So if you were supposed to have a 20-minute presentation, and because you've not used filler words, you deliver an 18-minute presentation, it's not the end of the world so long as it's punchy and has an impact and leaves people remembering what you've talked about. So I don't feel you can completely get away from filler words, but you can definitely move towards using them as little as possible. And preparing to be less fidgety, because I think people pick up when you're using filler words because you're being fidgety.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And that's a vital point there. This isn't about eliminating filler words, but it's about using them in a reduced manner and making sure that you're not using them because you're nervous or because you don't know what to say next. So thank you so much for your view there, T2. You've contributed quite a lot to this session here. So thank you. And did you see there that I just said so thank you again when I could have simply said thank you. So performance tips. Respect everyone's time. Remember I said earlier that that's my pet hate. Another speaker taking up more time than they've been given. We need to remember to respect the time of the delegates. We need to also remember to respect the time of other speakers. There's this old saying Well, I used to hear a lot of people say time is money. But I don't believe that time is money. Time is actually life. Because if we lose money, we can find it again. But if we lose time, if someone wastes 5 minutes of your time, you can never recover those 5 minutes again. You can't make up that time again. You can't live those 5 minutes again. So we need to respect everyone's time. If we've been given 5 minutes to speak, then we need to speak within those 5 minutes. Everyone who knows my husband and I know that we're sticklers for time. We're sticklers for time. I don't know who's worse out of the two of us. If we say that we're arriving at your house at 3 o'clock, we'll be outside the door before then, but at 3 o'clock, you will hear that knock on the door. If you invite us to an event and you say it's starting at 4, we'll be there for 4 o'clock on the dot. So when we're speaking, we respect the time that's being allocated to us, because we need to remember that although we have to be at that event because we've committed to come in to speak there, the delegates don't have to be there, but they've chosen to be there out of respect to us. So we need to repay their respect by not wasting their time. Whether this is in a social setting or a professional setting, we respect everyone's time. When we're invited to give a speech, when we're invited to a meeting, we respect everyone's time. During our speech, we take deep breaths, as we've said. We remain hydrated. And if we're in a panel discussion, we don't drown others out. If we're in a meeting, we don't drown others out. We give everyone else an equal opportunity to contribute. And I think that's so important, because very often we go and speak on panels and one person may have a lot to say and they start first. And then you find that another person is patiently waiting there to speak, and they end up not being able to speak because this one person has taken up all the time allocated to the panel discussion. A panel discussion is exactly that, a discussion, not a monologue. So if you've been invited to speak on a panel, please make sure that you remain aware of the need to give everyone else the opportunity to speak on the panel. So as to provide the audience, the delegates, with enough opportunity to learn from others as well as you. When we're invited to speak, we're not invited to speak to impress people or to intimidate others, the delegates, the audience, with our knowledge. We've been invited to convey knowledge, to share what we know with others. So we respect everyone's time. We don't drown others out on the panel, and we don't seek to impress. The idea is to convey knowledge, to share knowledge, to increase the knowledge amidst the delegates that have come to listen to us. If we're on a panel and we've only shared our knowledge, we've also deprived ourselves of the opportunity to learn from the fellow panel members whom we haven't allowed to speak. So we respect everyone's time, we respect the knowledge of our fellow panel members as well. And we don't interrupt others when they're speaking on the panel. Questions, comments? Any questions or comments? Contributions? Yes, please go ahead, Bissy.
Yeah, this is just you know, something personal anyway, about saying no as well when you're being invited to, you know, give a speech or talk about something. I found myself in a situation, I think about 8 years ago at work. On that same day, I was told to go to a meeting, even though I did know about what we were going to talk about, but I wasn't prepared. And, you know, I can still remember, you know, I just felt like a fool, like, because I didn't even deliver it very good. But again, I think, you know, sometimes you can say no if you don't think you know enough, or if you don't think you're prepared. And, you know, yeah, so that's just what I wanted to say.
I think that is, yeah, a very valid point, and it's something that I hadn't actually written into this. So that's something, again, that I've learned just now, and I'll write it in for the next course that I deliver on this subject. Yes, please say no if you don't feel competent enough to deliver or to share, or you're not prepared enough. If you're invited in as a last minute speaker, you can say no. Although I'd just like to share briefly, since you've just shared there, I'd like to share briefly in 2017, I believe it was. So I hadn't been invited to speak for quite a while due to my career curveball at the time. And then in 2017, I received an email late one night from a lady on LinkedIn who said that she'd had a speaker rather, drop out from an information security conference delivered by an IT magazine. So she asked if I'd be prepared to come in and speak the next morning. So I said yes. And the reason I said yes is because I was still striving to get back into my area of discipline. So I said yes. So again, it's important that we recognize that we cannot accept every single speaking engagement. So Bissy, you've made a very important point there. You will sometimes need to say no if you don't feel that you'll be able to give your best at such a meeting. If you don't feel that you'll be able to convey knowledge, you don't feel that you'd be able to share any information, it's so important that we are able to say, no, thank you. And that applies to almost anything that we do in life. We need to retain our ability and right to say, no, I cannot do that. I apologize, I cannot do that. And indeed, what you may want to do, rather than simply saying no, is to say, I can't do that tomorrow because I'm not prepared, but if you would like me to attend the next meeting to do this, that would give me more time to prepare. So we don't simply say no, but what we could do is say, I'll do this, but I can't do it tomorrow, or I can't do it next week. I need more time to prepare. And that would mean that when there's another conference or another opportunity for you to speak, they would consider inviting you again, because you haven't simply said no, you said not yet, rather than simply saying no. I can see a few hands up there with questions. Please, would we like to ask our questions?
Hello, sorry, can everyone hear me?
Hello, Becca.
Hello, how are you, Ma?
Fine, thank you.
Good. You mentioned earlier about allowing people to talk, maybe like during meetings or conference or anything. So how do you deal with like a manager or a colleague that's not like always speaking over you, not allowing you to talk? Sometimes I feel like saying that, okay, sorry, can I finish? What is the best way and the most respectful way to say this without being rude?
Okay, so one of the ways would be to just ask for a meeting with that colleague and to just raise the issue or raise a question. And the best way to actually raise such an issue is not to say, do you know that you always interrupt me? But you can simply say something like, well, I'd like to speak at events, but I would need more opportunities to speak at events without being interrupted. So you're not actually accusing them of something. You're simply saying you're taking that responsibility upon yourself. You're saying, I would like to be able to speak without being interrupted.
Right, because this happens a lot at work, especially with my manager, and he's Nigerian, he's Yoruba. So sometimes I feel like, and he's way older than me. So sometimes I feel like, oh God, if I say this, it's gonna be like, oh, I'm being disrespectful. So I just like keep quiet. But I think everybody is starting to notice that, especially when I start talking, he then want to like say, oh, you just want to like get his point across at that same time. So I just really struggle with the way to like tell him to like shut up in a way. So
No, but we can't tell anyone to shut up. I
no,
mean,
I'm just saying that, but
yeah,
I'm not
yes,
exactly going
yeah,
to say
yes,
shut up.
yes. The best way to handle it is a one-to-one conversation. And I understand what you're saying, particularly because I come from the same culture as you, the same
Yeah,
Yoruba culture as you. However, because we work in a culture where respect is mutual, all you need to do is to simply organize a one-to-one meeting with your manager and to just convey politely that you would like to be given the opportunity to speak without interruptions. Politely, tactfully, respectfully, but you need to convey that information. If you share that in a meeting, of course, that's going to put the other parties back up. So simply call a one-to-one with your manager and express your views.
okay, great, thank you.
That's it. Any further questions before we round up? Further questions to ask?
There are a few hands up.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, hi, thank you. My comment is just regarding the lady that spoke previously about, saying no. I think there's sometimes that you actually want to say yes, but you say no because you're scared. I had that happen to me last week, Thursday. It was on Wednesday night around 6 p.m. I got a call from BBC Scotland asking me to speak on TV, and I've never done TV before. And I was scared. I actually almost said no, but I said yes because I knew that it was going to be recorded and they would cut whatever I say that it's not right, they'll cut it out. So I think there's some places that you can actually say yes, even when you want to say no, because it's an opportunity that it's a one in a life. It's a very unique opportunity, and it's going to do well for your career.
Absolutely. So yes, sometimes we need to say no. We need to consider saying yes rather when our natural instinct, our initial instinct may be to say no, that I don't want to do this. Sometimes we need to just say yes and then to consider how we're going to make it happen. So yes, and as you just said there, it may be a once in a lifetime opportunity. It may be a career changer for you.
Yeah.
It may bring you more visibility in your career. It may introduce more prospects to you in your career or in your personal business. So yes, we need to balance our saying no, and whilst recognizing that we retain that right, we have that right to say no, especially when it's not out of fear, but because we need more time, we need more notice. Other
I have
questions,
one more
please?
question, please, for
Yeah,
me
go
as
on.
well.
Go on.
I've been in panel discussions where I felt like the other participants are talking a lot, but I don't really have much to say. So then again, I don't want to be talking a lot because they're talking a lot. So how do you draw that balance? I'm the kind of person that I'd rather say something in 3 sentences than say something in like 10, 20 sentences. So how do you draw that balance really without feeling like you haven't said much?
Well, that's a good question again, and you just simply make sure that those 3 sentences are memorable sentences. Make sure that they're impactful so that even if others speak more than you, your 3 sentences will be remembered by the delegates at your speaking opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I know we've got quite a lot of questions, a lot of participants raising their hands. So would you mind if I just go and deal with the last 2 slides, and then we will take all the rest of the questions. So I make sure that we complete the slides, but I will be prompt here. So for continuous improvement after the workshop, please let's ensure that we view any recordings of the session. Laugh at yourself. View your recordings so that you can improve towards the next session. Laugh at yourself. If others may be laughing, you may as well laugh at yourself. Remember I said earlier that if you laugh at yourself, if you learn to laugh at yourself anyway, then you won't be hurt if others are laughing at you. So you laugh at yourself, congratulate yourself, pat your own back, be your own cheerleader. Say a well done to yourself, because not everyone can get on the stage. Not everyone has the same knowledge that you have. Not everyone's willing to share their knowledge. So pat yourself on the back, say well done, say congratulations. Say I did it. If this is your first one, say I did it. Well done. Own any mistakes that you may have made, and don't beat yourself up about any mistakes you've made. Please don't beat yourself up. You live to speak another day. At least you've gotten on the stage to speak. So don't beat yourself up. Move on. You slipped up, you may have slipped up, but you move on. You get up, you move on. Seek objective feedback. In many of my speaking events, they tend to ask for audience feedback, and then they send you a scoring, 9 out of 10 or your average scoring. Seek objective feedback and use that to improve. Make improvement notes on areas that you may need to improve on from your viewing of your recording, and use that to prepare for your next speaking engagement. And keep speaking again and again and again. Keep speaking again and again and again, and keep learning from each speaking engagement that you attend. Now let's go back, please, to our questions, because I know that we had quite a few hands raised. So questions, please.
Lots of questions, lots.
Yes.
Then some people are sending to me directly, so I've told them to come and type here. So hopefully they will do that. As I said, I'm not going to send to me directly. They should send to the group or to the chat over here. So I'm just going to read out what Lola said. Lola said, I can't watch myself. So and I was just telling her, the only way I learned to be, confident about speaking in the public was a few years ago. I started recording myself on video. I was just doing a script up, and then I'll record myself and I'll watch, and I'm like, I hate this. But then I'll improve, then I'll improve, then I improve, and I say, you know what? I am looking at myself. I'm comfortable laughing at myself. Then I don't care what anybody else is saying. And that's how I overcame my own, stage fright or what's not. So that's what she said to me, and I'm answering her right now. And I'm sure she's going to be laughing too.
Okay, thanks so much for that. But I want to ask a question, and it's a phrase that I coined in 2004, which is on the Ladder Back Down logo as well. Who says you can't? When you say you can't watch yourself, what you're simply saying is that you don't want to watch yourself. So who has told you that you can't watch yourself? You can absolutely watch yourself. And if you can watch other people, then there's nothing stopping you from watching yourself. If you want to do it alone in the corner of your bedroom, you can feel free to do that. But remember that even if you can't watch yourself, the thousands of people that you're speaking to are actually watching you. So what's stopping you from watching yourself? I can't simply means I do not want to. But to improve as a speaker, you need to watch yourself after each event, laugh at yourself, as Timmy and I have said, laugh at yourself, and then move on. Take notes and then move on. Move on to your next speaking engagement, having learnt lessons from the last one. So please watch yourself. Other questions?
Questions?
So, sorry, I just wanted to find out, you know, when you were talking about speaking technically, let's say you're dealing with engineers or presenting, you know, would that be necessary really? Because sometimes the engineers want to hear it clearly and not necessarily use their jargons. Am I making sense?
Yeah, and I agree with you.
Yeah, which goes back to the fact that I'm saying it's better to be honest and be truthful and be yourself rather than trying to be what you're not. Do you understand?
Okay.
I'll give myself as a classic example. I've been working with the engineers for the past 12, 14 years consistently. The engineer, I'm actually one of the executives. And really, if we're saying anything, they actually listen to me more than what they have to say. I think they're even bored listening to themselves. Does that make sense? So, and I think that only because I'm so natural is the reason why I'm able to get away with. You know, I have a little bit of engineering background myself, but that's nothing like them at all. They're really experienced. It's nothing. I don't even use any word that would bring that back. So the question is it not better to be natural than trying to be that professional, you know, or say jargons that are not necessarily applicable? It's just
thank you for that. And again, what I was trying to convey there is that if you've been invited to a seminar where they're discussing, so let's say you're a nuclear scientist and you've been invited to a seminar to discuss the latest breakthrough treatments in neurology or something.
Yeah.
You're not going to go there and start talking about brain quiz games. So that is a technical seminar, and you're going to go and be talking about the technical discovery. Let's say there's a COVID-19 seminar today of scientists. The scientists invited to speak will be speaking about the new, they'll be talking about the vaccinations, they'll be talking about all the cells and the DNA and stuff like that. They'll be speaking technical language. So that's what I was saying. If you're invited to a technical workshop filled with technical people, and the subject is scientific or technical, then you're not going to start talking about games or just be yourself. You would have actually been invited because you're a scientist. Not that they wouldn't invite someone to just come and start talking about their day job or things like that. So what I was saying there is that dependent on the subject. So if I'm invited to come and talk about cybersecurity threats, for example, I won't go and start talking about about my cybersecurity career. When I'm invited to talk about the Chief Information Security Officer relationship with the board, for example, then I'm able to freely talk about finance. I'm able to talk about marketing. I'm able to talk about influencing skills and things like that. And that is not technical. But if you've been invited to discuss technical subjects, then you have to prepare a technical presentation. So that's all I was saying there. So it depends on the subject that you've been invited to talk about and the audience. If I've been invited to talk about cybersecurity to a group of school children, for example, then I wouldn't be speaking in technical language because they wouldn't understand.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So all I was saying is that dependent on your audience and the subject that you've been invited to talk about, then you need to retain that that level of knowledge that you're seeking to impart to them, to share with them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Other questions? Because there were quite a lot of hands earlier. Any further questions, please?
Hello.
Sorry.
Oh.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Tolani. Thank you so much for this.
You're welcome.
It's been so informative. So thank you.
Thank you.
What I find I struggle with, especially in this new world where, I've been working from home like most people since about March, and all my meetings tend to be virtual meetings. What I find I struggle with is obviously, having meetings at work. And because it's a virtual meeting, you can't see their body language or make eye contact with them. And you're talking away like I do, like a little parrot. And then, there's silence. And sometimes that makes me feel slightly nervous that, okay, I've said something and nobody is, responding. It's just quiet. What do I do?
Yeah, I think you've made a very valid point there. And before before this lockdown, the main reason that I've never delivered virtual training is because I hate virtual sessions with a passion. I've always hated virtual sessions with a passion. So this is just as difficult for me as it is with you. And you're right that there are different skills required when we're delivering a virtual session versus when we're having face-to-face conferences or face-to-face speeches. But all you can do is to invite engagement. As a delegate said earlier, and I've forgotten who it was, but a delegate said earlier that they invite questions during their speeches, and that's far more important when you're delivering a virtual session than when you're actually face to face with someone, because as you just said there, you can actually view their body language, you can sense what they're, whether they're engaging with you or not. But when you're delivering a virtual session, best thing to do is to ask questions, name individuals. So if you say, Tolani, would you like to ask me a question? That way you can see whether they've actually been listening to you or not, whether they've actually understood what you've said or not. So the best way to do it when you're doing virtual meetings is to simply ask questions, invite that engagement, which you're not getting because you're all virtual. I dislike virtual meetings. I dislike virtual interviews.
Yeah.
I dislike everything virtual. But this is the new world. This is the new reality. So we just have to embrace it and to continue to think of ways to do things differently, to do things better.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Tolani. Further questions, because I know that there were more hands raised just then.
They're still up.
Hi.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Sorry, yeah, it was me. So very valid points that I've sort of listened to, and also valid questions. I'll just touch on two that resonated even more so. One I'm particularly passionate about, and it's the one where the question was about how do I, like, if I'm in a meeting with someone who's also Nigerian and he's older than I am, and I don't want to disrespect him. I think, first of all, respect has to be earned, not demanded, and also that there is a baseline of courtesy. When you operate from a baseline of courtesy, which means I treat everybody with, with a certain level of politeness in a formal setting, regardless of their age. This is also about lack of discrimination. Okay, so I'm going to treat everyone the same, regardless of their color, their race, their ethnicity, their age, blah 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 blah, and it's supposed to be across the board. So that means everyone should also treat you with respect. So if you're being cut off in, mid flow whilst you're in a meeting with other people by someone who clearly maybe their demographic is very similar to yours, and you come from a similar background, and you don't want to be disrespectful because it might be older, this, that, and the other. There's a way you might be able to address that without coming across as disrespectful. You can easily say, for instance, might I respectfully finish my sentence? Or with all due respect, I would like to finish my sentence. I don't think that constitutes being disrespectful, or, just find a way to add those little words in there so that people understand that you're not being disrespectful, but you just want to finish the point you're making. Because if you're speaking and someone is interrupting you mid-flow, I mean, it can happen once or twice, that's okay. But if it's happening consistently, then there is obviously maybe an effort there to maybe undermine what you're saying. And that's equally as disrespectful. So I feel it's something I feel passionate about, because I feel like we don't, there's a fine line that we don't surf that wave successfully enough as Africans, or as, people of culture. Um, that my favorite analogy is the one where the president was speaking to the labor union leader, and he said the labor union leader was being disrespectful because he called him out on something he did wrong, and said, if I'm not old enough to be your father, I'm at least old enough to be your uncle. And I was like, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about your inefficiencies in the role that you occupy. So these are things that we need to be mindful of, and just treat people with courtesy, with respect, or with politeness. It makes life a lot easier. So that's one thing. The second thing was to do with, and I was a very, very valid question. I actually had me thinking, was when the lady was asking about if I'm on a panel and I've said what I have to say, and it's not, maybe it's been succinct, and then somebody else comes and says all these things, and I feel under pressure to say more at a later time. How do I do that? And I actually appreciated that question, because it made me think. One of the mottos that I live by is live within inspiration, always. So that means even though you've said what you have to say, you're also part of the audience listening into what the other person is saying. So if you take away the head of the speaker that you have whilst you're not speaking, you will pick things up from what the other person is saying. And by doing that, you will then have questions or have comments to make based on what the other person has said. So yeah, I think that's my personal sort of recommendation in that respect. Thank you.
Because I just got in myself. Thank you so much for that. And please, could we kindly mute? Could we kindly mute everyone, please? Because we've got feedback from someone's mic. And please, may I just ask us?
Iṣẹ́ tóun lóun fẹ́ rà ní 20,000. Owó tí yẹ fẹ́ fi ṣe
Hello.
pàtí Sedfort ní kí lorúkọ ẹ̀ ní January ó di 20,000 lọ. Wọ́n lè yọ 20,000.
I'll unmute myself. And sorry, could I then just ask us, please, if we're willing to stay for some extra time, because we're running out of time, but I'm more than willing to stay for as long as it takes for us to ask all our questions. So it appears as if we may be running over, but I know that some others have got more questions. So are we willing to stay for a bit of extra time, please? Thank you. And if so, could we please continue to ask our questions?
So thank you, everyone. If you really have to go, then we just say thank you. Just so that before we carry on, just so that we know, if you please go on LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, please connect with Ibukun. She's on LinkedIn as Ibukun Emmanuel Adebayo, and the ladder back down is also there. I don't have a page yet for Black and Scots, but I will do soon. So please subscribe to all the subscribables. And then if you want us to add you to the WhatsApp group, please give me your number. My number is 07921 557248. I will be happy to add you to the group. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies. I need to update all the slides with that WhatsApp group detail, and I'll also try and include that in the letter to the delegates, just reminding them, sharing the link of the video with them. So I'll try and remember to add the WhatsApp group number to that email before I send it out. Kindly remind me though.
I will do.
Okay, so any questions, please could you continue to raise your questions and we'll just hold a discussion, but the session is now closed, but please feel welcome to raise further questions, please. Please, thank you.
T2? Yes, thank you, T2, for them for those two last questions, comments. I was actually gonna say something on that. I'm still on the cultural demographic. So if you are in a session or a meeting where maybe the leaders or the organizers, they say something that's not accurate or they're wrong about maybe a discourse, how do you, without being seen as being rude, especially this top-down thing we have with African elders, so they said something and they're wrong and you disagree, okay, yes, I could treat it later on, but what about other people there that has taken or that's been fed with a wrong information? You don't want to come across as rude or forward, but the issue still needs to be dealt with. So how do you go across, how do you get across your message?
Okay.
Getting them correcting themselves or correcting them.
Thank you so much. And I think I need to express something really strongly, first of all. It's not just within the African culture that individuals or elders don't like to be portrayed as wrong. So I've been in meetings in various roles where I've been asked a question, actually, where I've been asked for my opinion on something and I've expressed my opinion and it's displeased other participants simply because it's not what they've wanted to hear. So let's please not focus on the African culture. It is human nature, until you've attended the emotional intelligence workshop that we did, or any emotional intelligence workshop, it is human nature to not want to be seen to be wrong. And the best way to handle individuals like that who don't want to be seen as wrong, who have stated something wrong in a meeting, is to first express your own opinion to the subject without trying to correct them and without saying they are wrong. So we simply express our own opinion of the matter without accusing anyone of being wrong and without saying, I'd like to correct this person. You state what your opinion is on the issue, and then you leave it to the delegates to decide what version they would like to accept. But we end up creating conflict, and it's not a case, I can tell you this now, that it's not a case of someone being older than you or from a different culture or the same culture as you. It's just human nature to not want to be seen as wrong in public. So you simply, as T2 said there earlier, you say, I would like to continue my what I was trying to say. I would like to complete my sentence, complete the sentence, and then after the meeting, you go back to the other party and discuss matters with them. But we don't seek to prove somebody else wrong within a meeting or in public in particular. It's just something that most humans would respond negatively to. And it just creates unnecessary conflict when we could tactfully state our own opinion, share our own knowledge, and then go and resolve any differences with the other party afterwards, regardless of whether the person is Nigerian, African, whatever culture they've come from. Trust me on this, in 20 years of leadership, I've consistently found that most people, whether they're in a junior role or in a senior role, whether they're African, Nigerian, English, whatever culture, they simply, most people do not want to be seen as wrong in public. So you simply state your view of the subject, state your view, share your professional knowledge of the matter without being emotive, without being emotional. Even if they've cut you off, don't share your displeasure with the entire delegates or your entire team in that meeting. Don't let your displeasure become a subject of conversation. Simply state facts as you see those facts, and then you go and have a discussion with the person whose opinion you disagree with after the meeting. So further questions, comments?
Thank you for that answer.
You're
My
welcome.
second, it's not a question, but it's just like an encouragement really to everyone. So speaking with confidence, I remember a couple of years back, I tried to take on maybe I could do like a presenting task in my like a charity, like my church, for instance, and I volunteered, and the person told me, "Oh, you don't have a recording voice; you have a telephone voice." And I was pretty young; I was about 22, and I mean, not too young, but that kind of knocked my confidence, and I relegated myself to writing as opposed to speaking, and it stuck with me, and it haunted me for a very long time because I'm like, oh, I don't like the sound of my voice, so I don't want to speak, even though I do have a gift of the gab, trust me, but I would do that in a closed group. I would not do it like in an official capacity. That knocked my confidence until I think Auntie Buku and Sister Timmy, they would help me like, oh, you're good at this. You're good at this. You're good at this. And people would tell me, oh, your voice is, but I didn't believe in myself because one person on a large scale had knocked my confidence. So I cut out of the, I mean, I don't have anything against the African culture, but we have our ways. So I cut myself out of that circle, and then I would go online, register with groups, and I started to build my confidence. So my encouragement to someone here is find yourself, because when you have self-awareness, find your purpose, find your truth, and then whatever trainings you need to have or get to build yourself to place yourself to wherever you're supposed to be or where you would like to be, and then ultimately surround yourself intentionally. Sometimes you have to find the people that best speak life into you, and then you would shine your best self. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. And I think again, as I said earlier, I was a bit concerned there as you continued speaking, Debbie Spice, simply because we have a confidence building workshop in a fortnight on December the 5th, and you were saying absolutely everything that we want to start, that we want to share on the 5th of December. But you have spoken very well there, and I just really would like anyone on this session today to try and make sure that you register for the session on the 5th of December, because we have too many people walking around who have been told something about themselves. They've been told a lie about themselves, and they've walked around with this lie for years. Who has said to you that you don't have a speaking voice? How can anyone tell you that you don't have a speaking voice? As long as you have got a voice, as long as you are not mute, as long as you have been blessed with a voice, as long as you were born with the ability to speak, then that means that you have got a speaking voice, and nobody has the right to tell you that you have a telephone voice but not a public speaking voice. Nobody has that right. So I'm pleased that you mentioned that. Let's talk on the 5th of December. But for anyone here who's not attending the 5th, as Debbie Spice has just said there, it's important that we discover ourselves, we attend training and we attend workshops to just boost our confidence, and then you go out there and speak, because you have got something in you that the world needs to hear. So thanks so much for that. Thank you. Further questions, comments, please.
I just want to encourage the lady that just spoke. Her voice is beautiful.
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah,
of course it is. I've known her for 20 years, and I know that I know she said that she's got the gift of the gab. I think that anybody who knows her would agree to that.
Yeah.
And you've got a beautiful speaking voice. But
yeah, she does,
absolutely everybody has a beautiful speaking voice. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your accent is. I don't care what your job title is. Absolutely everybody that is able to speak has a beautiful speaking voice. We may have different accents, we may have different intonations, it doesn't matter. We all have a beautiful speaking voice. So don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. You're not inadequate. You're not an inadequate speaker simply because you don't speak the same language as another person. You're not an inadequate speaker because you don't speak in the same accent as another person. That is not what I was trying to convey earlier. What I was trying to convey is that if you do speak in multiple accents and you're asked and you're invited to speak to an audience where you speak with their accent, then please, change your accent so that they can understand you. But if you don't, that doesn't make you a speaker that is worse than a speaker who can speak in multiple accents or multiple languages. So we all have a beautiful voice. So remember, you have a beautiful voice. You each have a beautiful voice, and you can use that voice if you've been invited to speak anywhere, in a small setting or in a large setting. It's because the organizers believe that you've got something valuable inside of you to share with others. So don't let your voice stop you. Don't let your accent, don't let anything about you stop you. Don't let your height stop you. Don't let your features, your physical features stop you. Please remember that we've all got a beautiful voice. We've each got a beautiful voice on this forum. We haven't heard from everybody on this forum, funny enough, at this workshop today, but each of you have a beautiful voice. Trust me on that
Do you
one.
have a dialect?
You're such an encourager, Emmanuel. That's so beautiful.
Well, it's not a case of encouragement. You said, you know, that my sister has a beautiful voice, but we've each got a beautiful voice. I've heard from many of you today, and I haven't heard anyone speak in an ugly voice. So based on that, I don't believe that there's anything such as an ugly voice. I prefer accents actually to the straight English accent that I've been given with just because I was born here. But I like the fact that I can switch my accent. I like the fact that I can speak Yoruba fervently. No, I think that certain accents globally as well, certain accents are too formal. Whereas I'm not a formal person per se. You know me. I mean, and I'm not a really formal person. So I prefer speaking when I'm speaking to friends, you know, or speaking to my parents, where I can switch my accent, you know, where I can speak, you know, the little pidgin that I can speak. I can barely speak pidgin, but I prefer accents like that. I find them more interesting, more exciting. My husband and I joke so much about my accent. You know, I mean, when I say Turkey and he says Turkey, and he's like, why are you saying Turkey? And he teases me all the time. And I know, but I prefer speaking in, you know, my native dialect. I'm grateful for the fact that I actually went to live in Nigeria for 10 years and I learnt Yoruba, because otherwise I would have been a very boring person just speaking English all my life. But that's just a personal view, me personally here now. So further questions, please, because I can see that we've got other hands raised. Questions, comments?
Would you mind if I added to the narrative?
Yes, please.
Briefly, because it's something that is a passion of mine, and I think being on this forum today is not an accident. I feel like for the narratives around the world to shift about how we see ourselves and how others see us, and when I say ourselves, I mean our demographic, there's a lot of effort that we need to put in. We can't just sit back and think it will come to us. We need to make steps, and they start at the very basic level. I see that there are a lot of ladies on here, which is not, well, I wouldn't call it surprising. Actually, it's more encouraging than surprising, and it's inspirational as well. And I believe that, and this is not to take away the onus and responsibility that fathers have to play in families, not to take it away at all. There is a big sense of responsibility. There's a lot that fathers have to do as well. However, I do feel like when it comes to primary carers, if you have to pick the primary out of the primary carers, it will more likely be the mother. The first sort of bonding that a child has is with the mother. So there's a lot that mothers have to do in the formation of a child, primarily. And so the way you communicate with your child is equally important. Speaking with confidence is not just about professional, the professional element, to be honest with you, to a certain extent, not generally, but to a certain extent, it's a game show. It's a game. People go in there to play the game because the game is survival, you know, and that's the reason people move up ladders, the hierarchy, the whole risk, everything is all, it's part of this game that you play when you go outside into what, and then you come back home into your refuge, your solace, right? And that's why you call that, you know, your home life is the real world, is a real life, right? So when you speak to your family members, when you speak to your children, when you when you communicate with them. If you're not communicating effectively, if most of your communication is about telling them to shut up, sit down, do this, do that, you know, is barking orders at them and not giving them the opportunity to speak, you're doing yourself a disservice as well. Because one, you're not improving your vocabulary. Two, you're not allowing yourself to receive feedback. And children are very useful sources of feedback because they normally tell you how it is. They learn how to lie from adults or from society. So you need to keep working on yourself. And unfortunately, and I don't like the fact that the narrative about Black people or Africans tends to be more negative than positive, to be honest. But we have to be very honest with ourselves and look at the things that we can do to improve. And when we, you know, because of the fact that our vocabulary is not necessarily the most extensive in this language that is maybe not primarily our official language, we struggle. We do struggle. If I as a Yoruba person had to speak in Yoruba, which is the language of my origin, I will probably have a lot more to say because there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of depth, there's a lot of things that you learn within the language. I speak 5 languages, but it's not just about the language, it's about the culture behind the language as well. You have to understand that because otherwise you're doing yourself a disservice. In Yoruba, for example, you can have one word, just one word, a 3-letter word, and you just put different accents on it and it has different meanings, completely different meaning. How do you explain that? No? So there's a lot of things that we can do to improve ourselves. And one of them is being on this kind of forum right now. So I just wanted to say to everyone, well done, first of all, and then just encourage everyone to keep doing it. Will you have people that will have something to say? Of course. There will people that will have a lot to say about the way you speak, how you speak. Sometimes they do it out of their own insecurities that they don't want to face. You know, if you remember, bullies tend to be people that are insecure in themselves, and so they take that out on other people. And bullying is not just physical, it can be verbal. So don't let anybody take your shine away because you're Black, because you're a woman, because you're this, that, and the other. Everybody can't be the same, but each person owes it to themselves to work on their own improvement. And back to the children, it is so important that you give your children this confidence that they need to face the world. Because if you don't give it to them, the world will take away the little confidence that they have anyway. They will take it.
Can I interject there, please, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
So again, you're going into what the content of our course in a fortnight, but you said very valuable things there. But I'd just like to say one thing that I'm going to say on the course. Nobody can take away your confidence. You can only give it away, especially when you become an adult. No one can take away your confidence, but you can give it away. People can say things, they can do things, but your confidence comes from within you. And people can say everything that they want to say, but if you refuse to cast away your confidence, to give up your confidence, if you refuse to give up your confidence, regardless of what is said about you, when you're an adult, I know it's difficult as a child, but when you become an adult, you can actually hold on to your confidence and refuse to give it up, regardless of what is said. But we'll tackle that during the confidence workshop, because I'm just mindful of the fact that this is a public speaking session. So I'm just trying to make sure that we keep everything focused on public speaking and remembering, as you said, that yes, that you've got, despite your differences, despite your nuances, and I'm really impressed that you can speak 5 languages. I can speak 2 and that's just it, but 5 languages is a lot, and it's really, really good, really impressive. But you know, regardless of your differences, regardless of your nuances, please remember that you are an equally valuable human being to every other human being out there, titled or untitled.
There is a question in the, sorry, I have to get the doors. There's a question on the chat, please.
Okay. All right, let me just look in the chat. So thank you. So you said you said that you talked about continuous improvement. How do I measure if I am making continuous improvement? Each time you go and speak, you view yourself, and you can see if you've improved from your previous speaking engagement. So we can attend workshops, we can discuss with people, we can rehearse, we can practice, but the only time that we can know if we've really made an improvement or any improvement is to go out and speak again and again and again. But we need to remember that there's never going to be a time when we're going to be perfect. Nobody's a perfect speaker. I'm not a perfect speaker. I've spoken globally. I'm not a perfect speaker. I didn't ace your interviews. I think I did it twice. I think I delivered ace your next interview session twice. Am I brilliant at virtual interviews? No, I'm not. So everything in life involves continuous learning, continuous improvement. And you can only measure yourself by attempting to perform the action that you're learning again and again and again. Recognizing that life itself is a continuous learning process. It's a journey of learning. So you measure by continually doing that action, by performing that action, by performing public speeches, by attending public speaking engagements, by observing other speakers, and by speaking yourself without fear.
And then he asked another question to say, feels like I'm still assessing myself. Do I need external feedback?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So remember in this last slide, we said as part of your continuous improvement, seek objective feedback. Yes, so we do need to seek objective feedback from delegates, from children, from colleagues. Yes, so we need to make sure that we're seeking that feedback and we're taking anything that is constructive on board. Any constructive criticism needs to be taken on board rather than simply say, oh, they're just saying their own, or that's their opinion. If we invite feedback, we need to be prepared to assess that feedback, see whether it's true or not, and then improve. And then simply improve. For example, with the delegate that said that their manager sometimes speaks over them in meetings, if that delegate were to then ask their manager about their performance in meetings, the manager may say, oh, that you never speak up, whilst remaining totally oblivious to the fact that it's because of their continuous interruptions that this person is not speaking up in meetings, because you're not giving them the opportunity to do so. So that feedback would not be considered as constructive feedback, but it would present the perfect opportunity for the delegate to simply say to their manager, oh, the reason why I'm not speaking up in meetings is because it seems as if you constantly interrupt me or you constantly stop me from speaking up in meetings. So yes, we do need to make sure that we're seeking that feedback from delegates to our workshops, from the organizers, and then we also take our own assessment of our performance from our recordings. Thank you. So we've got further questions. So let's go through more questions. I know that I've seen a hand up. Did I see a hand up earlier? Or hands up. Did I see hands up or
yes, that's me actually.
Yeah. Thank you, Ola. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to go back to that confident thing actually. Naturally, I know I am a confident person. I don't even need anybody to tell me. It was sometimes I ask myself if I'm actually going crazy by that extra confident. But the only reason why I said that is little things can actually break somebody's confidence. I know it's that topic that you want to treat on the 5th, but I just want to help myself. When I was growing up, when we went back to live in Nigeria, and I used to sing, honestly, I thought I was a good singer. But my mom was so irritated by my creative. She wanted me to be a doctor or an engineer, you understand? And I know I'll never forget that I was about 7 or 8 years old. She's full spoke Yoruba. I didn't understand Yoruba then. But I knew she was talking about me, but I didn't know what she was talking about. But what she said was, she can't even sing. And I kid you not, that was the last time I sang. And till date, I love music. You can't understand. So instead of me singing, I became a dancer. I was actually a professional dancer. And as big as I am, I carry myself, I still dance very well till date. Do you understand? So what I'm saying here is that the things that people say to you sometimes can actually affect you, whether you're a teenager or older. Even till now, at 55, if my mom tells me something is not good, I just literally would not do that thing, but just because it's coming from my mother. Do you understand? So I don't know if that is something like...
Yeah, and that's something that we'll address there. But I did say earlier that when I made that, I said that as an adult, we need to wrestle against anyone trying to take away our confidence. As a child, I did say that this doesn't apply to children. Yes, I'm very aware, well aware. I mean, so we could have both been doctors if we'd followed our parents' wishes. So my parents wanted me to be a doctor, and that changed the course of my GCE performance. GCSEs, they're called in this country, but I also was taken to Nigeria when I was young, and my parents wanted me to be doctors. So I did all my science exams for my GCSEs and then a few arts. And with the sciences, I got all Fs. I failed all my science papers because, and I was told I was called a dunce, I was called a dullard, but I don't want to go into the course, into the confidence workshop. But yes, that did affect my life considerably until a very late age. Until a very late age when I started changing course, and then 2 years after I started changing course, I then met my husband. And that meeting is, so 20 years ago, and that really transformed my life. His presence in my life. None of you have the videos. Maybe I'll send out a link to those videos into the LinkedIn, into the ladder back down thing. I've already shared them, but the testimony of the difference that he's made in my life. But that has inspired us to consider maybe setting up a buddying scheme with the ladder back down members of the WhatsApp group. I'm thinking of setting up a buddying scheme where we can partner with someone who's going to continually tell us throughout 2021 and beyond that, you know what, buddy, you can do this, you can sing, you've got a good speaking voice. So I don't know why, even though you were told many years ago that you can't sing, why you haven't, as an adult, decided to do something with that voice. But you've got a very good speaking voice and you are confident. You didn't need to say that just now, because from the onset, you've participated in this workshop and you haven't come across as someone who's shy. So I appreciate the fact that you are very confident, and I appreciate the fact that sometimes we're told things in our childhood that can change the course of our lives and stay with us, affect us for the rest of our lives. However, because I have actually had to wrestle with life to regain my confidence, and I'm still struggling till today to retain that confidence. But I'm struggling with life, with certain individuals trying to tell me that, no, you're not as good as you think in that area, where I'm simply saying, no, I am as good as I can be in this area. I'm continually learning, but I am good. So I'm having to wrestle to retain my confidence. And I think that everybody, once we become adults, can find it within ourselves to wrestle and to take back our confidence, to not end our lives in our elder years regretting not having done something, regretting not having spoken more publicly because someone said that you don't have a good speaking voice. No. So we're going to retain, well, from the 5th, we're going to actually try and explore ways in which we can regain any confidence that has been taken away from us in our childhood, and how we're going to retain that confidence and begin to live with that confidence, live and continue to fulfill our purpose. But again, everyone here has got the ability to speak. Everybody here has got knowledge that they need to share. Everyone here has got knowledge that I need to learn. I may be a confident speaker, but that doesn't mean that I don't need to learn one thing from each and every one of the 31 of you participants that have remained on the line. Each and every one of you has got one thing within you that I need to learn, but which some of you may have felt scared to share today. But trust me, you've still got it within you. You still have it. You have that knowledge within you, even if you haven't shared it today. So please, let's just hold on to that no one can take your confidence away from you. No one can take your knowledge away from you. That knowledge that you have, no one can take it away from you, and no one can take your speaking voice away from you. So because of that, you've each got the ability to speak in public with confidence. With confidence. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That's not being aggressive. It's not being aggressive to say to someone, I hold an opinion on this. I have got certain knowledge in this area. That's not being aggressive. It's not rude to want to share your knowledge with your peers and with seniors. That is not rudeness. That is not aggression. And confidence is not aggression, by the way. Confidence is not aggression. Confidence is positive. Aggression is what is negative. But I haven't heard from anyone who I could view as aggressive on this forum today. And aggression isn't necessarily loud in some cases. Aggression isn't necessarily verbal in some instances. So please, don't let anyone through their behavior or through their words take away their confidence, because they're unable to do that unless you give them permission to, especially once you become an adult. Further questions, comments, please. Questions, comments?
I'm good.
We all okay?
Yep, you've done very well.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sorry?
I was going to say, I'm looking forward to the 5th of December.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And we all have to change going into our 2021. We all, including me, have to go out with a new sense of optimism and a new sense of, determination to achieve our purpose, with a new sense of confidence that you know what, that because I'm alive today, that means that I have got that ability and that opportunity to actually go out there and become what I believe that I can become.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
please.
So how do we add value to you as
You're adding value to me by contributing to this session. I'm learning.
No,
Remember I said.
And then
no. I'm saying, for example, do you have a book? Do you have a website? There must be something that we can in return do. You haven't charged for this session, and you have done a lot. People might not know, other people might not know the value, but I actually do. So I'm saying, what do you have that we can?
Do you know what I would like? I'd like to hear news of you actually excelling, because that was the purpose of setting up the ladder back down. It was to see more Black people visibly excelling. So the only thing that you can do is to go out there when we've got when we're delivering courses on workshops on information security, for example, sit those exams and come back and give a testimony that you've passed. That's all I need. If we're delivering workshops on you speaking publicly, send us videos of you speaking publicly. Follow the ladder back down on LinkedIn and on YouTube. If you've got access to YouTube, if you're subscribed to YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube. Comment on our videos. Comment on our LinkedIn posts, and that's it.
Value. Thank you.
But
I'm definitely not. I don't want to be a speaker, but I do it every time. I'm an event and marketing consultant, so I address people for the past 21 years. I pick up mic when it's necessary.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be a professional speaker. I promote speaker. I would give them job to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's what I do. But I'm enjoying what we're learning. Who knows? I'm not God. Maybe I might at some point want to be it, but I doubt it very much. I'm more of an event marketing person. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's good. But you may find that you need to be able to speak to promote.
I do. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I just do it. But what I've learned a lot is there's also an art to it. I've just picked up mic. I'm just myself. I just talk. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But then listening to you and this session has given and information that is giving me knowledge that there is an art. It's not just that you pick up mic. I didn't know all this, that you would have to go for this training and blah blah blah. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So it gives me more value for what you guys do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your kind comment. And I'm sure that you've been speaking well, in places. And I know that you said something just there, or maybe I misheard you. You said, I'm not a speaker, but you are.
Yeah.
You are, because you've spoken publicly.
Yeah.
So you're a speaker.
Yeah, okay. I address people all the time, 100%.
Yeah. So you're a speaker.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known her for a while now, and we have the opportunity to work together. I know she's brilliant, so she's just trying to be humble.
Exactly. Yeah. You're just trying to be modest, but you are a speaker.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, that's good.
Thank you. Yeah, you are a speaker, and absolutely everyone here has got something within themselves. So please, if that's the one thing that you take away from there, absolutely everyone here is there to is here because you've got some knowledge within you that you can share. Sorry, this workshop today, in response to your question, is that the workshop has been geared for public speaking solely. So I was asked during a previous session to prepare a workshop on public speaking, and so this isn't about effective communication in general.
Well done to you.
So thanks, Dayo.
So
Thank you.
You still haven't answered my question. So it's just on YouTube and you're online, LinkedIn.
Yeah, YouTube and LinkedIn. And then once you you know, I mean, so anything that you've learned, you can share it. Feel free to share it, and of course, just keep excelling. That's the only payback that we ask for, and share with others as well. But keep excelling, because the whole idea of the ladder back down is to just try and improve our lot collectively as a Black race, you know, so that we're not waiting for other races to help us. We're actually helping ourselves. That is the idea behind the ladder back down, that we continue to send the ladder back down to ourselves. Because you know, we've spent enough time trying to complain or trying to fight, but I believe that if we can love ourselves and try and help ourselves collectively as a race, we will then have more collateral when we're going to ask other races to help us, to promote us. If we're divided against ourselves, we can't expect other races to be more loyal to us or more respectful of us than we are of ourselves.
Yeah.
So we just need to just start giving of ourselves to ourselves and trying to make this world a better place for ourselves, for us. We need to just start reaching out to ourselves and sharing of what we've got, sharing knowledge, sharing compassion, not being scared of our fellow Black human overtaking us. I don't care if I don't get another speaking opportunity for the rest of my life and you suddenly start receiving 20 speaking opportunities a year. I don't care about that. As long as you're doing well, I'm fine with that. I don't care if you go out tomorrow based on the ACR interview workshop that we've held previously, and you go out there and get a 250K job when I'm not even on half of that. I don't care. It's no skin of my nose. The idea of the ladder back down is just to start getting our fellow Black peers to fulfill their purpose, to start enjoying life without tripping ourselves up, to stop tripping ourselves up, to start loving ourselves, to start respecting ourselves so that we can be respected by other races.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. So my pleasure would simply be, repayment would be for me to see you all thriving, for me to see each of you thriving. Oh, Dayo,
Thank you. Thank you.
Dayo, you are so funny there, and I'll just stop the recording before I comment on your on your post there. So thank you everyone for attending, and I'll just stop the recording and then I'll comment and laugh about your post.